year. And what you said about $100 billion, the expectation for climate finance, that's not static. By now, that is also believed to have gone up to around $250 to $300 billion a year.
Yeah,
that's also reality. So our reference point has shifted, and that's logically so. And now we, in the developing world, I think, may I say, on the other side of the table, we face a very interesting time. We have seen the evolution of the discussion 2009, 2015, COP21, and we are also heading to Glasgow COP now. If you look at all these, and one wonders, where is it actually going? Are we chasing a mirage? Is it a mirage? Here, as Tracy rightly said, here you have our friends on the other side of the table, partners, they have made a pledge, partly legally binding, partly quasi-legally binding. And then we are waiting for that. And we realize that the coffers for public finance is drying up. We realize that whatever was committed is near impossibility that anything would be redeemed. So where do we go, frankly? I think for a country like Bangladesh, or maybe large countries, even like the BRICS, for example, we see a two pitchfork. One is that we keep on demanding that, whatever you have pledged, you fulfill that pledge. You fulfill your commitment. The other is that let's have a reality check. Where does it go? I was looking at very interestingly, and I see that if you see from the OECD dark figures, 21% of the climate flows actually went from OECD dark to developing world. Very interesting. Again, I went further down to their reports, and it was clear. If we look at if you decompose the adaptation finance, 2 years back, as the figures are off, water and waste management got 32%. This is very important for you also. Agriculture, forestry, and allied disciplines, natural resource got 23%. DRM, 21%. Infrastructure, energy, 7%. And other cross-sector, 14%. This is very important. Important in the sense, you see, and also I think a clear reference point is not coming through COVID. I'll come to that in a short while. So all the discussions that we had, this was where things were predictable, whatever we have been discussing past 12 years. But we now approach a very serious point of reference. Much of the conversations is almost likely to change thanks to COVID, past 1 year. Why? I'll come. Now, what we are seeing and the discussions we just had, I was witness to some conversations, very privileged conversations in the Global Adaptation Commission deliberations. And it was coming very clear that COVID is what the reality check as of last 2-3 months is something like we are already seeing a single-digit fall in adaptation finance, expected adaptation finance. Now, after COVID, that has been accentuated. But what is the quantum? It may be going to a double-digit rise and fall. So the gap is actually far faster widening. We do not know what is the extent. Tax and revenue, trade revenue in every country, Bangladesh or UK, for example, if you see on the two sides, are also falling. So when we are asking for demand for public finance-driven, grant finance-driven adaptation finance, what is going to be the reality? Then the competing needs for health and other emergencies have increased as well. So they're going to eat up whatever the countries would have thought that they were going to commit. So you can see that it's going to widen even further and faster. The sovereign credit rating for countries is also falling. These are the important calls. So when we go back to our partners, they might come back with these things. So where is post-COVID, where can we really look at the possible landscape of adaptation finance? I think we need to understand that can we be a little creative? And this is my answer as a practitioner, as I see that. One is that the whole discussion or whatever are pledge bond, including COP21, can we bring those, the other pillars of climate adaptation, and then put those into post-COVID recovery plans? To me, that's very important. So simply not harping on whatever is pledge bound for last 8 to 10 years, but we be a little creative and we redirect the river, and say that, okay, fine, here you are bringing a lot of stimulus, fiscal stimulus. Why not bring those, drive those from dirty industries to green industries, for example, or green instruments, for example? Important would be that I think a second point would be that the instruments that we are looking at, nationally or globally, are also very conventional. That kind of thing is neither going to attract the MDBs, multinational development banks, as also the private sector, because it's very clear. Our partners, development partners, they're all saying that you leverage it, you can bring a little critical mass, but then you leverage it. How do I, for example, as Bangladesh, leverage that? There we have to see that, can we go right from the climate space to COVID and then say that, COVID reorganization can also come if you take climate adaptation. So that can get us a lot of resources which are going to be in faster flow. I may come back later, but I think that's my major pitch. And this is something we need to see, that how we can connect with G7, G20, the discussions in the World Economic Forum, and OECD. Yeah, this much for now.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Riaz. I think what Tracy Lu was pointing out, that not only the long-term finance for adaptation, but also short-term or medium-term. What we have seen that it is not trickling, it is not trickling down. It is not say anywhere near the say scale of demand. So how best we can scale that up? Long-term finance scaling up, and also short and medium-term finance scaling up in terms of adaptation. Because adaptation finance for now is very important, especially during this COVID period. We have seen that adaptation requirement is much more important than years back. So how to generate, mobilize adaptation finance right away for our green recovery, for our say not only green recovery, but also say facing climate change, facing say climate crisis. So because finance is of paramount importance, how to catch it. So low hanging fruits are there, but we need to say struck the hard nerves of adaptation finance, hard nerves of climate finance. Tracy.
Thank you, Kamal. You gave me a difficult task to speak to. But just picking up on what Ambassador Riaz was mentioning, it is true that in these these times of less certainty, where we don't have the same discussion as a point of reference because of the COVID pandemic, these discussions are even more pressing, and the urgency is even more striking. And I mean, just to pick up on the issue of the gap of adaptation financing, what I can mention is the data that has come recently from the UNEP gap report. I mean, it is clear, like in the international fora, that with 35 billion a year in 2018, this does not meet a current annual cost that has been predicted as 70 billion USD a year, and by 2030 requiring somewhere between 140 and 300 billion a year, and by 2050 by 280 and 500 billion a year. So in order to get to that level of financing, we would need something like a 4 to 9-fold increase in the next decade. And it's clear, as you've both mentioned, that public budgets alone may not be able to address these financing challenges. This brings a risk to the global economy and consequently the financial sector in terms of climate vulnerability, and the private sector discussions about increasing adaptation funding and towards these climate impacts is real. In the technical examination process under adaptation that we have under our international negotiations, there have been concerns expressed. The need to increase private sector investment in involvement and awareness in adaptation financing needs is real. And in these discussions, parties have noted that there's a share of private sector investment and financing that is low. It's not just due to the challenges and barriers, but it's also due to clear reasons of involvement that are not being fully realized. And in these discussions, participants have discussed or called for the need to de-risk investments and increase demand for adaptation projects and services, and as well support supply chains. Just one thing to mention also in the context of defining the gaps, in our process, we also define the needs of developing countries, and in this way, in the climate finance discussion, parties have agreed to produce a report on the determination of needs of developing country parties relating to the implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And this report is coming out this year. Under discussions under the Standing Committee for Finance, we have heard members discuss this issue of the COVID pandemic and how it could be reflected in such a report. But the report is still being finalized, and we will have further information on that over the course of the year. But for this needs report, many countries see it as an opportunity to inform the overall process on what needs are required, and to input this into the global stocktake, into the setting of the new collective goal and the replenishments of the operating entities of the financial mechanism, and particularly relevant to the discussions under the GEF that will commence after COP26. Yeah, so I'll stop there. I don't know if you have further reflections.
Yeah, Tracy, you are absolutely right. As Ambassador Riaz also pointing out that the gap is widening, and during the stocktake, we are supposed to have the report on need. The determination of, adaptation need of the developing country parties. But we are supposed to have it and discuss it in SBI in June, but that June meeting is now uncertain and is not going to happen most likely. So not even a virtual discussion. So how are you going to have that stock take and that is going to be delayed. As we also pointed out earlier that we are supposed to have $100 billion from 2020, but now we have entered into that 2021. 1 year we have lapsed already, lapsed, but we are not seeing the mobilization of resources, especially for climate, green climate fund, which is supposed to deliver $100 billion per annum from 2020, and we are supposed to make it say every year an incremental rate, but that increment is not going to happen right now, as we have seen from 2010 to 12, $30 billion. Then we are supposed to have it raised in the next 3 years. Then again, it should be say increased further, but instead what we have seen in reality, it has been plummeting and plummeting, and now regarding $100 billion, again we are seeing that it is not coming up. So how to say have that stock take in a prudent manner and try to be smart for smart adaptation. We need more adaptation right now, right here. We have to take concrete adaptation actions onto the ground. But because of finance, because of technology, we can't have that degree of adaptation. So we are neither having mitigation nor adaptation. That is the say global failure. We are not facing the Rana climate change. Ambassador Riaz, you take.
As I said, and as Tracy corroborates, one thing is increasingly clear, even before COVID, and now with COVID, it's even more, that relying on or harping on public sector driven public finance from global capitals for climate finance, the possibility and the expectation is increasingly reduced and minimalistic. And post-COVID, I'm pretty much certain that it would be, emphasis would be more to ask us to be creative and to say that look for non-public finance. So one is about private sector. Now, the issue is that which private sector are we talking about? Are we talking, definitely we're talking about the global private sector, but that's a even more complicated thing because I need not explain that. But at the national level, are there any opportunities even for a country like Bangladesh to be creative? I would tend to make an attempt in that direction. Let me give an example. With the Dutch assistance, we have now drawn up a 10-year, or not 10-year, I think, a 10-year implementable Bangladesh Delta Plan. If you look at the financing outlay of that, over a period of 10 years, $37 billion to be spent on 80 plus projects. I was looking at the menu of the projects. Very interesting. I can easily see that across good number of those projects, even breaking down into sub-components, we can smartly and creatively bring in adaptation pillars into that. If we can do that, the next logical question will be, and Bangladesh GDP equivalent is to be committed. Good part of that is also supposed to come from international private sector as also Bangladeshi private sector. The key question, there is only one key question, is that how do we bring or draw up an attractive concessionary framework, set of concessions which the private sector would demand. I would sense that if we are to look at non-public finance flow in climate finance, we need to give it a serious thought to this. I'm not simply looking at philanthropy, meaning, for example, Gates Foundation and others, but there's also a limit because they're also dealing with a range of sectors or issues. Climate change is only one. Increasingly, we face a lot of competition, as I said already. So the issue is, how do we really look at enticing or mobilizing? It's not mobilizing, it's enticing essentially the private sector in to come with interesting instruments. For example, there are a lot of examples. I can only cite one for in the interest of time. I was in Sri Lanka, and there's a fantastic $1 billion apparel company. One day they came out with something called green accountability reporting. So I said, what is this? I could clearly see that they were already taking decisions, greening their process to make it climate proof. And those changes they were making on, because they could see that when they're exporting to Europe and United States, these questions will eventually come. So they were trying to be in advance, ahead of others, and positioning them and then trying to get some dividend. Now, if I am the finance minister or environment minister in Bangladesh or in Sri Lanka, and I give them incentive that, okay, those who step forward early, I'll champion this, I'll incentivize them. With a lot of interest. I think that is a more creative way of really looking at, or simply not keeping our conversations focused into what it is. It's absolutely logical and right that we keep on harping in Glasgow, Paris, and other places. That isn't complete. That's right. No doubt about it. At the same time, in parallel, if you begin this conversation and do the experimentation, I think that is a more logical way forward.
Yeah, those are, say, innovative thinking.
I may slightly disagree with you, because what we may think of innovative, actually these may eventually be the highways for this, because we are getting some senses from even in Netherlands in the Climate Adaptation Summit. We can see that it may overtake the commitments in COP. Sorry.
Right. Okay. In fact, say we need to think of it and new thinking, new thought, because say climate finance is very important, especially to take adaptation programs onto the ground. And the scaling up of adaptation, scaling up of other, say, even capacity building, and also technological devices. We need innovation, we need new thought, and we are marching forward to say Glasgow COP26, and hopefully in COP26 we are going to have a new conversation, a fresh conversation, because we have experience of COVID, how we are fighting COVID. For fighting COVID, we have mobilized a lot of resources. We have generated a lot of global resources. But for adaptation finance, can we do that? Tracy.
I think Ambassador Riaz brings up an interesting and important point, that innovative sources of financing, of course, must contribute to the sources of financing for adaptation projects and programs. Certainly the private sector, certainly philanthropy, all stakeholders have a role to play. And the perspective that I mentioned is just speaking in terms of the role of what multilateralism and what international cooperation can provide in speaking on the issue of adaptation finance. Certainly that the levels of financing may not be commensurate with the need for action and the urgency of the challenges in front of us. However, I guess multilateral climate funds can play a role as one of the range of sources for channeling adaptation financing to build capacity, to enhance readiness. The multilateral climate funds do have a role in terms of being able to help scale up existing projects and learn from investing in, for example, monitoring and evaluation and learning systems that can pool financing and provide a kind of environment for new ideas and blended projects. And this kind of environment is, I guess, unique to the multilateral climate funds that you may not find in the same way with private sector, with investors, with other stakeholders that are involved in the adaptation finance forum. So from this perspective, and I can just refer back to our executive secretary, who increasingly calls on parties to continue to contribute to the $100 billion discussions, to the discussions on a new collective goal post 2025, and to increasing support for funds such as the Adaptation Fund that have proven critical on the ground to provide concrete solutions to communities and to developing countries, and particularly vulnerable communities in least developed countries, in small island developing states. So I think that the role of multilateralism still does have a way to contribute to this discussion, and I look forward to hearing more of your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Riaz. Your final take ahead of COP26 in Glasgow.
Yeah, Kamal bhai, I mean, you have been a seasoned person in the whole process, in the journey. For 25 years, we have been asking for sustainable, robust, predictable finance, meaning public sector driven. And we accepted quote unquote innovative finance, essentially, as Tracy said, meaning thereby private sector or foundation, etc., to complement, not to be the mainstay.
Right.
But if you ask me to be practical, I would say, I being younger to you in the whole journey, even today, I can see that post-COVID, when things will be normal, we would see the appetite is coming down. Let me put another perspective. If you see the global ODA flow from the developed countries, OECD DAC, has been in the region of $120 to $130 billion a year. Out of that, you tell me how much goes to climate change, how much goes to climate finance adaptation. Look at JEF, look at GCF, how much? They are not even coughing up even $1 billion a year. Can we expect to some magical thing to happen to that to jump up like anything? And after COVID, to be honest, not. So I think even for a country, we need to be, if you are to be really smart and strategic, I think this is a time we really need to think that, you know, how creatively, and then we negotiate with our partners and say that, look, I am doing on my own in Bangladesh, out of my own revenue, as even shrinking revenue, committing that. You try to come and match that. It's something like matching. And today, blended finance is increasingly something an order of the day. So if we do that, and if we say that I as government or my private sector is coming, can you match that? Can you and let's leverage that. That could be more interesting to see that then we can project by project, we can sort of go into that, whether that's energy, agriculture, infrastructure upliftment, or urbanization, urban projects. That's my take, frankly, go to. Meaning that, you know, let's be strategic, let's be smart, and go to the table with the even keel. At the moment, it's very lopsided. We keep on shouting, we keep on demanding, and the other side is simply relaxed and reclining and saying that, okay, we will give you this much. So it's a pittance that we get, frankly. We cannot afford to keep going like that. That's my take.
Thank you, Ambassador Riaz. Tracy. Your final message ahead of COP26 in Glasgow.
Thank you, Kamrul. I'm really impressed with the creative and innovative thinking that we had today, and I really hope that by COP26 in Glasgow that we can create a good environment to resume talks, because the discussions on adaptation finance and on increasing ambition are continue to be of an urgent nature, and we continue to need to bring creative solutions to find coherence and synergies with others in the landscape of climate finance. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you both there. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we have spent a lot of time, almost 1 hour. It was very pleasant to have this conversation with both you, Tracy, and Ambassador Riaz, for your prudent comments. Also innovative and creative conversation in a sense. So hopefully COP26 will be a productive one, will be a fruitful one, and we can make it a successful one, especially in terms of delivering adaptation finance and climate finance. With that, I would like to stop here. Thank you very much, Ambassador Riaz and Tracy Lu, for your participation in this conversation on climate adaptation finance. Thank you.
Thank you as well for having us over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Kamran.
Yeah.
Hope to see you again.
Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Climate Channel. My name is Fanny.
Hi, I'm Sophia.
And I'm Sylvia. Recently on social media, I saw people talking about how climate change isn't real and how nothing bad is happening to our Earth's climate.
I saw that too. Basically, the Conservative Party leader tried to add climate change as an issue to his campaign, but many other party members of his party disagreed and dismissed it as it wasn't a real problem.
Yeah, recently I also saw the Conservative representatives at the party's policy convention voted to reject adding green-friendly statements to the policy book. A whopping 54% voted against it. The idea that was voted against stated that the party believes climate change is real and it is willing to act.
Yeah, the Portneuf-Jacques Cartier riding in Quebec, which proposed the change, also asked to recognize that Canadian businesses classified as highly polluting need to take more responsibility and reduce their GHG emissions.
Mm-hmm. And only 46% of his party agreed with him, proving O'Toole wrong. Liberal Environment Minister Jonathan Wilkinson responded on Twitter by saying,
Even if Erin O'Toole cared about fighting for climate change, his climate-denying base is stopping that from happening.
Many Toronto delegates are saying that conservatives need to lead with clarity, focus, and intelligent solutions, not buzzwords. The party is moving in reverse, with a leader that won't correct course. Future generations stand to lose the most, as we do not have strong leaders putting us on the right path.
Wait, I'm so confused. Why can't the party leader just put the policy into his campaign? I mean, he is the leader after all.
I'll explain. In order to make it into the party's official policy, what's known as a double majority needs to happen. A majority of delegates as well as a majority of provinces.
The representatives that voted against the importance of climate change are wrong. The main reason they don't believe that climate change is real is because the Earth warms up naturally. The Earth has had increases in temperature since before humans existed. However, they fail to realize that humans are speeding up the process of global warming, which is causing many long-term effects.
Yup, they refuse to believe in the greenhouse effect. This is a naturally occurring and essential process that is regulated by nature. It enables the Earth to be a livable planet by moderating the Earth's temperature. However, due to the burning of fossil fuels and other activities, humans are adding more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than are needed, throwing off the natural balance. This results in an enhanced greenhouse effect.
A lot of these climate change deniers don't believe the Earth is warming up more than it should because of things like misleading statistics. For example, there's this very popular line graph that shows how much the Earth is warming up, and the numbers on it are technically correct. The graph shows an almost straight line, and climate change deniers use this graph to disprove climate change. But in reality, the scaling of the graph is way off.
Yes, I saw that too. And in fact, the scale has thousands of degrees, while only a few degrees of change make a big difference. A more accurate graph would have had a smaller scale to properly show the difference in temperature. The problem is, a lot of climate change deniers are using these real facts that are presented in a misleading way to prove that the Earth is just warming up naturally and that we have nothing to do with it.
Yep, a majority of major climate changes were proven to be caused by humans. Starting with the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century until today, changes in the climate have been mainly the result of human activity, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC. The Industrial Revolution caused a large change in industrial work from human labor to machinery, which kickstarted the era of combustion engines. As a result, the excessive burning of fossil fuels by humans are causing excessive amounts of greenhouse gases entering our atmosphere.
Yeah, and the planet's average surface temperature has risen about 2.12 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 19th century, a change made largely by an increased carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere in 40 years. The 7 most recent years were actually the warmest. 2016 and 2020 are tied for the warmest year on record.
So the Greenland and ice sheets have decreased in mass. Data from NASA's Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment shows Greenland lost an average of 279 billion tons of ice per year between 1993 and 2019, while Antarctica lost about 148 billion tons of ice per year.
Wow, that's a lot of ice. And on top of that, most scientists believe in global warming as well. One survey showed that 97% of scientists agree that global temperatures have risen during the past 100 years. And 84% of the scientists surveyed that they personally believe that human-induced warming was occurring, and 74% agreed that currently available scientific evidence substantiated its occurrence.
Yeah. Have you heard that glaciers are retreating almost everywhere around the world? This includes the Alps, Himalayas, Andes, Rockies, Alaska, and Africa. It's extremely concerning how fast we're losing our ice.
But some of the climate change deniers' points make sense. Like, the Earth has been warming for a long time. Just in the last 650,000 years, there have been 7 cycles of glacial advance and retreat. A lot of these climate changes are attributed to very small variations in the Earth's orbit that change the amount of solar energy our planet receives.
Yes, the Earth has been warming a long time now. But as we said before, the Earth has never been warming at this rate. Ice cores drawn from Antarctica and tropical mountain glaciers show that the Earth's climate responds to changes in greenhouse gases. Ancient evidence can also be found in tree rings, ocean sediments, coral reefs, and layers of sedimentary rock.
This ancient or paleoclimate evidence reveals that current warming is occurring roughly 10 times faster than the average rate of ice age recovery warming. Carbon dioxide from human activity is increasing more than 250 times faster than it did from natural sources after the last ice age.
And the current warming trend is of particular significance because most of it is extremely likely to be the result of human activity since the mid-20th century and proceeding at a rate that is unpredictable over the decades to millennia.
The mid-20th century is actually when the Industrial Revolution began. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the acidity of surface ocean waters has increased by about 30%. This increase is the result of humans emitting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and hence more being absorbed into the ocean. The ocean has absorbed between 20
So despite all this evidence that's presented that climate change is real and that because of human activity, it's sped up and it's getting really dangerous, and how we only have, I think it's about 7 years until climate change is completely irreversible and the damage of global warming. And people are still choosing to focus on how they don't think it's real, even though there's so much evidence in front of them. And we should really focus on how to prevent the amount of time that we have left until the effects are completely irreversible, because that's what matters. We should really be focusing on doing better and making sure that our Earth doesn't just go to complete garbage.
Yeah, we all want to save the planet and all of this, but how are we supposed to sustain it if half of the globe doesn't even know about global warming or believes it doesn't exist, especially bigger powers? For example, the Conservative Party, and we know Donald Trump also said he doesn't believe in global warming. If these big people are talking about how global warming is fake, how are we supposed to change it? Because no one's going to believe in it. That's why we believe education is one of the most important things to fix the environment. The more people learn about what's going on, the faster we'll get solutions. And the more people who know how to fix it, the faster our Earth will get better. So we all need to band together and educate our children and everyone else to hopefully help our planet.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of Climate Channel. Be sure to share, like, and comment on our videos and follow us on our Facebook page. Bye.
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 Happy Easter, everyone. This weekend, my family will join Christians here in Canada and around the world to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is the second consecutive Easter where COVID-19 has forced us to celebrate differently. That means many of us won't be gathering with friends and family, and some of us may not be able to attend Easter service. I know that these activities just aren't the same over Zoom or on the phone, but we can still find ways to celebrate and reflect on Jesus' message of compassion, kindness and hope, because now those values are more important than ever. At our house, Sophie and I will still help the kids hunt for Easter eggs, and as a family, we'll try to get outside and enjoy the spring weather. I'm lucky to have the people I love the most living in the same household as me, but I know for many Canadians, this Easter will be another holiday spent alone. So today, let's make sure we check in on the ones we love, and let's share the hope and joy of this day with those who may be isolated. My friends, soon this crisis will end, and when it does, we will build a stronger and more resilient country together. From my family to yours, I wish everyone celebrating a very happy and blessed Easter. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Hi,
It was mainly in the West Bengal part of India. Gradually, also the Bangladesh was found to be affected by arsenic contamination in groundwater, and subsequently other parts of
Happy Easter, everyone. This weekend, my family will join Christians here in Canada and around the world to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is the second consecutive Easter where COVID-19 has forced us to celebrate differently. That means many of us won't be gathering with friends and family, and some of us may not be able to attend Easter service. I know that these activities just aren't the same over Zoom or on the phone, but we can still find ways to celebrate and reflect on Jesus' message of compassion, kindness, and hope, because now those values are more important than ever. At our house, Sophie and I will still help the kids hunt for Easter eggs, and as a family, we'll try to get outside and enjoy the spring weather. I'm lucky to have the people I love the most living in the same household as me, but I know for many Canadians, this Easter will be another holiday spent alone. So today, let's make sure we check in on the ones we love, and let's share the hope and joy of this day with those who may be isolated. My friends, soon this crisis will end, and when it does, we will build a stronger and more resilient country together. From my family to yours, I wish everyone celebrating a very happy and blessed Easter. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Hello everyone. Je suis très heureux d'être ici ce matin avec les ministres Haidu et Anand, ainsi qu'avec la Dr. Tam et le Dr. New. We have a lot of ground to cover this morning, so let's get right into it. I'll begin with vaccines. This morning, I visited the vaccination clinic at the Nepean Sportsplex here in Ottawa. It was great to see more and more people getting vaccinated. People are in a good mood. A lot of folks were there with their elderly parents. Everyone was chatty and focused, but quite frankly, it was the amazing volunteers who were working so hard who really encouraged us all, and we saw smiles on everyone's faces. I also had the chance to chat with a few of the many healthcare workers who are part of this vaccination effort. They're all doing an incredible job during this really tough time. My job as a politician is usually go around shaking hands, so that wasn't the challenge that we got to do. There was a number of older folks who I needed to remind that an elbow bump is the way we do it. But we're all figuring out how to navigate through this, and the fact that so many people are getting vaccinated is a really good thing. Our frontline workers have given up a lot to stay safe. Last week, I spoke to nurses from the Victoria General Hospital in Winnipeg. They shared what this past year has been like, caring for isolated patients in serious situations, sometimes being their only point of contact, and holding an iPad or holding their hands through a window while family members watch through a window. It was incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging for healthcare workers across the country, even more so when it comes to the fears that on returning home, they might be bringing home this disease to their families. It's been incredibly stressful, but they continue to step up every single day, and all of us need to make sure we're doing the best we can to keep them from getting overwhelmed and overloaded with new cases. But everything they do makes them the heroes of this pandemic. Présentement, notre plus grande priorité est de faire en sorte que le plus de Canadiens possible puissent être vaccinés le plus rapidement possible. Et on travaille sans relâche pour y arriver. À ce jour, on a livré plus de 6 millions de doses de vaccins aux provinces et aux territoires. Cette semaine, on va recevoir nos plus importantes livraisons jusqu'à maintenant avec 3,2 millions de doses. Ça inclut les livraisons prévues de Pfizer et de Moderna, ainsi que les 1,5 millions de doses du vaccin AstraZeneca qu'on va recevoir aujourd'hui de la part des États-Unis. As we've been saying for months, and as we've been planning with the provinces and territories since last year, the end of March will be followed by an increase in vaccine supply. We now have handily exceeded our promised target of 6 million doses delivered before April. And this week, we begin our ramp-up phase. Throughout April and May, 1 million doses a week are scheduled to arrive from Pfizer alone, plus Moderna, plus AstraZeneca. And for June, we have good news to share this morning. Pfizer has now confirmed that they will be moving up 5 million doses from later in the summer into June. That'll bring our total from 4.6 million to 9.6 million doses for that month alone. Of course, that's in addition to the other doses of the Moderna and AstraZeneca vaccines that we'll also get. A lot of doses being delivered means a lot of people who are able to get their shot. If you haven't had your vaccine already, it might be your turn or a family member's turn soon. If you want to learn more about vaccine safety and effectiveness, there'll be a Facebook Live event tomorrow where Dr. Tam, Dr. New, and other experts will answer Canadians' questions directly. To attend or get more information, go to the Healthy Canadians Facebook page. Today, I also want to talk about where we are with the virus and what that means going forward. In some places, cases of COVID-19 are holding steady or even going down. And especially in long-term care homes, vaccination seems to be making a real difference in protecting people from outbreaks. That said, hospitalizations from COVID-19 remain high, and case numbers are going up in many regions here in Canada and around the world. Variants of concern, which can spread more easily and make people even sicker, are increasing quickly. In BC, where the number of cases had been under control, they're now having to put in place new restrictions for the next 3 weeks. I want to extend my full support to Premier Horgan and to all premiers across the country as they make tough decisions to keep people safe. As we have since day one, the federal government will have their backs and do whatever it takes to save lives, to protect our frontline workers, and to support jobs and businesses until we get through this. Il ne reste que quelques jours avant le début de la fin de semaine de Pâques. Et la Pâques juive a commencé samedi dernier. C'est maintenant la 2e année de suite que ces célébrations se déroulent en temps de pandémie. Malheureusement, ça veut dire qu'il faut continuer de faire bien attention. Dans la dernière année, on a vu les cas augmenter après d'autres congés, comme celui de l'Action de grâce ou après Noël. C'est très important d'éviter une augmentation après Pâques si on veut continuer le printemps dans la meilleure position possible. Je sais que c'est décevant, mais il faut éviter les rassemblements. Ce n'est pas le temps de voyager. Continuez de porter votre masque, de vous laver les mains et d'utiliser l'application Alerte COVID. La vaccination de masse progresse bien, le beau temps s'en vient, mais il faut continuer nos efforts un peu plus longtemps. Avec la hausse récente des cas dans certaines régions et les nouveaux variants, on ne peut pas baisser nos gardes. Alors qu'on continue nos efforts pour protéger les Canadiens, il ne faut pas perdre de vue que la pandémie a accentué les inégalités à travers le monde et a eu un impact plus marqué sur les populations vulnérables. À ce sujet, hier, avec le secrétaire général des Nations unies, Antonio Guterres, le premier ministre de la Jamaïque, Andrew Holness, et plusieurs dirigeants mondiaux, on a tenu une 3e rencontre sur le financement du développement. On a discuté de solutions concrètes pour aider les pays les plus gravement touchés par la crise économique actuelle, notamment en ce qui a trait au surendettement et à l'aide internationale. Il faut adapter nos systèmes économiques afin qu'ils répondent aux enjeux mondiaux urgents tels que la pauvreté extrême, les inégalités et bien sûr les changements climatiques. Le Canada est toujours là pour écouter et pour agir. Et on va certainement soulever ces questions lors de nos prochaines discussions avec le FMI, la Banque mondiale, ainsi que le G20 et le G7. As we rebuild from this pandemic, we have to make sure no one gets left behind. Yesterday, Ministers McKenna and Monsef announced $250 million for transit in rural and remote communities. This fund is part of the unprecedented public transit investment we announced last month, and it is the first federal fund dedicated to rural transit. This is part of our job to create jobs and fight climate change. It's also about building more inclusive communities where seniors can get to their doctor's appointments and where people of every age can get the services they need. Before I end today, I want to say a few words about Easter and Passover. Again this year, we won't have the kinds of celebrations we were all hoping for because we just can't afford to let our guard down. I know I've said the same thing before every major holiday over the past year, but this time, what's different is that even if the end of the pandemic is in sight, the variants mean the situation is even more serious. We're entering the final stretch of this crisis. We just need to stay strong a little longer. More and more vaccine doses are coming every week, so there's reason to be hopeful. So please, keep yourself and your loved ones safe. Now is not the time to travel. Avoid gatherings and parties, and continue to keep your distance. I know it's not easy, but together we will get through this.
Welcome to South Asian Environment Dialogue. Those of you who see this program every week, every Sunday know that we discuss a range of issues on environment and climate change in this program. And today we are going to a special day itself because today we are going to have our 25th episode. We have started almost more than 6 months back, and today we are going to have our 25th episode. And today's episode is also special in the sense we are going to discuss about a problem which has been haunting South Asia for more than last 3 decades, arsenic. We call today's program, Arsenic is the Curse Getting Bigger? Why I'm saying so, why the title is like this, I'm going to explain sometime from now. But let me share with you that this program is brought on by the Climate TV channel Canada in collaboration with the Prudence Media channel India and also the No TV Bangla, a YouTube channel from Bangladesh having more than 80,000 subscribers. Without doubt, any further ado, let me introduce a very, very eminent panel that I have with me to discuss today's issue. I have with me Alan Fryer, Professor of Earth and Environment Science in the University of Kentucky, and he has worked extensively on this agenda, both in the Ganga Basin and also the Mekong Basin, and it's really, I'm looking forward to see and looking forward to hear from him about the issue in South Asia in general and Ganga and Mekong in particular. Welcome, Professor Fryer, to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have with me my very good friend, Professor Abhijit Mukherjee. Abhijit is the Associate Professor in School of Environmental Science and Engineering, a major frontline researcher and scientist in the groundwater and related issues in India right now, Abhijit. And I think Abhijit's paper on artificial intelligence regarding arsenic has actually triggered today's program. Welcome, Abhijit, to the show.
Thank you.
I have with me Ashok Ghosh, Dr. Ashok Ghosh. He's the chairman of the Bihar State Pollution Control Board, but that is only one part of his identity. He's an avid researcher and working on these issues and having been part of various Government of India and other committees. Welcome, Dr. Ghosh, to the show. It's absolutely having you. I have with me, I think Abida has joined. I have with me Abida Farooqi. Abida is the Associate Professor in the Environment Science Department of Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, Pakistan. Welcome, Abida, to the show. And I have also with me Dr. Debapriya Mandal. Dr. Mandal is a lecturer in global health, St. John's University of London. And it's fascinating because we also need to know the health component of arsenic. And welcome, Dr. Mondal, to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you. And I last but not the least, is very, very important. I have with me Dr. Anwar Jahid. Dr. Jahid is the Director, Groundwater Hydrology and Bangladesh Water Development Board. And Bangladesh and India, at least the West Bengal part of India, are the areas which are being most affected by arsenic. Welcome, Dr. Jahid, to the program.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation.
Absolute pleasure to have all of you. Before I go to Abhijit for triggering it, let me share with you that arsenic is an agenda, as I was talking about. It was kind of from the early 80s, 1983 to be precise, when first the arsenic problem was unearthed in a way. And then it was mainly in the West Bengal part of India. Gradually also the Bangladesh was found to be affected by arsenic contamination in groundwater. And subsequently other parts of India like Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, they were also being found to be affected. And other parts of South Asia, I think in Pakistan, that there are two zones at least, Punjab and Sindh, if I'm not wrong. These are areas where kind of we are having problem with arsenic. Now, we all know that. But the latest finding of Abhijit, I think Abhijit will be detailing on that. The latest paper of Abhijit says, I think in Indian context, through the artificial intelligence method, Abhijit's and his team's findings is that 20% of the land area in India, the groundwater under that being affected with arsenic. And 250 million people, 250 million people, much, much more than the population of many, many countries, are exposed to the threat. So that's a big, big situation. So let's start from that, and then we'll try to go to the other parts. Let's start with Abhijit. Abhijit, what's the reality right now? What's your finding?
Janto, so I have been working on the arsenic crisis in South Asia for almost last 20 years now. And together with many of the panelists here, we have been doing extensive studies in India, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, and other countries. So this study that we are talking today, it's one of the more recent studies that we have done, working with the government of India, like the Ministry of Jal Shakti, working with the Jal Jeevan Mission database that government of India hosts, which is about 27 lakh data points, 2.7 million measurements that government of India has. So we have applied machine learning techniques to recognize the patterns. And doing so, we have been able to detect areas which are exposed to arsenic in drinking water, mostly in the drinking water. Okay. And the paper talks about the distribution of the arsenic not only in West Bengal or associated states, but all across the country. And it shows out some very distinct patterns that which were not known earlier. We had some sporadic information from here and there, but our work showed very distinctively that there are some very specific zones across India, and that would also kind of extend to our neighboring countries like Bangladesh. We have another paper, transboundary Ganges Delta with Bangladesh. On a kind of a conservative estimate, who would be exposed drinking arsenic-laden water as of today.
And you are saying that it's pan across the country, not really much bigger area than what we thought earlier.
Yes. So, so if I have to give more precise locations, so we have arsenic pollution in the Ganges Delta or Ganges Basin from eastern UP to West Bengal. Then in the Brahmaputra Basin, most of Assam, much of Meghalaya and Nagaland and the surrounding areas, Arunachal Pradesh. And in the west, we have Punjab, parts of Punjab, and that goes to Pakistan also, transboundary. And then if you come to the rest of India, there are some parts of Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh in the Narmada Basin where you have some pollution. and then in Chhattisgarh, which is more of a volcanic source, and then down south, close to the gold mines of Hatti and Kolar.
Okay, so it's quite a wide area being kind of thought to be affected. So I'll be coming to you for the further on that, but let me, before I go to Professor Fryer for an overview of South Asia, as because the Indian situation being raised, let me go to Dr. Ghosh, who is also the chairman of Bihar Pollution Control Board. Dr. Ghosh, what is the situation? See, the scientists like Abhijit are kind of giving data. What's the ground level situation, say in the state of Bihar and Arswell, Bihar, the part now of the Jharkhand? What is the situation out in that Gangetic plain?
Actually, when I started working on arsenic issues in groundwater of Bihar, way back in 2003-04, nobody believed that arsenic exists in the groundwater of Bihar. And when early publications were there, even government was not ready to accept the reports that arsenic exists. But as of today, the well-known problem as far as groundwater of Bihar is concerned. And in India, after Assam and Bengal, Bihar is the third state that is supposed to be highly affected by arsenic contamination in groundwater. And Bihar has 38 districts. Out of that, 18 districts have high level of arsenic in groundwater. That is more than WHO limit of 10 microgram per liter. And you will be amazed to know that in
bigger than we assumed it to be. But also it's a fact, from 80s onwards, a lot of money has been pumped in to counter the arsenic problem. As an scientist and as well as an executive, what do you think, that has that money been utilized well to counter the arsenic? Do we have a kind of a long-term plan, or we are just doing the ad hocism out there? What's your personal contention?
My blunt answer will be no. Money has been spent, lots of money has been spent. But unfortunately, due to wrong planning and lack of proper operation and maintenance mechanism, and lack of community participation, the structures that are put in the field, that they become defunct in very short time. So from one side, you go on putting money in new structures, and old structures are getting defunct. And that is why in many areas where I had worked in way back in 2004 and 5, even today, people in that area, they are drinking the same old contaminated water. So it is not there that money has not been spent. It has been spent, but it's not properly spent. Although I'm a part of government now, but still I'm very, critical about the way the money is being spent and the way the mitigation is being planned.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your opinion, because that's always being asked, that with so much money being pumped in, why we can't have a solution. I'll be coming back to you, but let me go to Professor Fryer. Professor Fryer, you have heard about the Indian scenario, the study by the Professor Mukherjee and his team, and also Dr. Ghosh's point of view. Overall in South Asia, we will be talking to Pakistan, we'll be talking to Bangladesh experts, but overall in South Asia, how you see the problem? How big is the arsenic problem still now?
I would defer to some extent to my colleagues who are closer to the situation on the ground as part of this panel and their collaborators, but I think it's still not fully appreciated. I would go back to the paper that you mentioned that Abhijit Mukherjee and his group just published, the numbers there are perhaps a factor of 5 higher than the numbers that we've been talking about previously, because we've been focusing primarily on the Ganges Basin. And I think that, as Abhijit said, there is a recognition among local communities, perhaps, of the local scale of the problem, but until recently, not a full national or transboundary scale recognition. And I think part of it is simply because there has not been the effort to develop a subcontinental scale picture that integrates the various local scale detections and kind of removes the political boundaries and simply focuses on the geologic commonalities in terms of, for example, where the river basins are, that the most pronounced contamination is associated with the aquifers in the basins of the Ganges and the Brahmaputra and the Indus.
Okay. I'll be coming back to you. I have a query that of late, maybe since 2010, we may not be talking about arsenic contamination a lot. The issue seems to have gone a bit of a back burner. Has the issue been resolved, or we are kind of consciously talking the other agenda? I really don't know. Would like to know from this very eminent panel, but let me first go quickly hear the situation in Bangladesh and Pakistan, and then I'll come to Professor Mondal to know the health part of it. First to Mr. Jahid. Dr. Jahid, what is the situation in Bangladesh?
Oh, okay, thank you. So you know that in late 90s, 1998, 99, Department of Public Health Engineering, they conveyed a detailed national survey, and they have found that 42% of our shallow tube wells, tested tube wells, were arsenic more than 10.
42% in the entire country?
Within the country. And
so that's why, sorry to interrupt you, it is saying that largest mass poisoning in history. If you go to the internet, Bangladesh arsenic pollution is being talked about as the largest mass poisoning in history. Sorry, please continue. It's very important.
Because out of our 64 districts, shallow groundwater of 61 districts are more or less contaminated by arsenic. Okay. And you know that our floodplain and deltaic areas are highly contaminated. And yeah, you have mentioned rightly that maybe after 2010, we did not think much on the spreading of arsenic contamination. Rather, after enactation of our arsenic mitigation policy in 2004, the government's was focused on to supply alternate source of fresh.
I'll be coming to that. Dr. Jahid, what the government is planning to do or is doing.
Okay, and if you consider the present situation now, in 2018, we published a paper with the collaboration of UCL, UK, and World Bank, and we prepared the risk map regarding arsenic, salinity, and depletion of water table. And if we consider arsenic, that still about 64 million people are exposed to arsenic contamination if we consider the WHO
64 guidelines. Million people
are exposed, but
potentially.
Yeah, but the government is providing the alternate sources.
I'm coming to the alternative. Let me, Abida, you have to unmute yourself, and you keep unmuted both video and audio. Abida, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Fine, great. What is the situation in Pakistan? I think in Pakistan, Punjab and Sindh are the areas where the arsenic problems are mainly being found. What's the situation out there?
Yes, thank you, Vasu. You are right. In Pakistan, the most affected provinces, we have two provinces which are most affected, that is Sindh and Punjab. Actually, the problem, like in Bangladesh and in India, in Pakistan, the problem started in late 90s. It was in 2000 when we have the first incident. And after that, then PCRWR, Pakistan Council for Research in Water Resources, with the help of UNICEF, they started some testing of wells for the arsenic. And in 2004, it was declared that Sindh and Punjab are the most contaminated provinces in the country. They tested throughout the country. We have two more provinces, but the situation is less in those provinces. I must say that in Pakistan, arsenic contamination is a big problem, but it's less worse than as compared to India and Bangladesh. Okay. And maybe the reason is we have not tested too much. In India and Bangladesh, there is a massive testing.
I think that's very interesting. Yes. That's very interesting. Yeah. And also, I think whatever the little background study I have done, I've seen that unlike India and Bangladesh, in your case, the anthropogenic cause of pollution is much more. Your industries are, your lead smelters and other industries are putting up arsenic in the groundwater. That's what I have found. I've come to for that. But let me go to Devapriya. Devapriya, I think it's fascinating what we have heard from the entire span of South Asia. But what the health implication? We know the obvious implications, but through the water, through the food, what is the current level of research saying about the health contamination in general and South Asia in particular? Devapriya.
So what I will say, Jayanto, over here is that we know that arsenic can cause any type of health implication. So it is not only a carcinogen, but it can cause many, many other health. Adverse health outcomes, which includes cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, adverse reproductive health outcomes, and even it can impact the infants for developmental outcomes. I want to put some figures in perspective. So one of it is like, recently there was a news fed where, say, a civil society group in India called Inner Voice Foundations, they reported that in last 25 years, 10 lakh, so 1 million people have died from diseases caused due to arsenic. And to bring you in perspective, I think it is very common to say, like, what is the death caused by COVID?
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you think that these figures are official figures or these are reliable figures? This 1 million is a huge, huge figure. So what's your personal perception?
It is true, because it is over the span of 25 years that they have said that there could be such deaths. But at the same time, I can also tell you that based on our risk estimations, like when we estimated the cancer risks, we found there is a potential of 6 per 10,000 developing a cancer due to lifetime exposure of arsenic.
6 per 10,000. 6 per 10,000. So that's again a big figure.
Yes, 6 per 10,000. So this is based on the study we recently did in Bihar. So 6 per 10,000 can develop cancer. This is just cancer. I'm not talking about CVD or anything else. So can develop a cancer due to the exposure to arsenic from food and drinking water. I might just put one prospective data on it. So Abhijit mentioned about 250 million people who might be exposed to arsenic above the WHO guideline of 10. So if we consider that a normal prevalence of arsenicosis, so which is the skin manifestations we talk about, the skin problems, which is around 15% of exposed population. We have normally seen it in various studies. That takes us to 37 million people being exposed to arsenicosis based on this 250 million. And to bring you to perspective, so we talk about in India is a country where cardiovascular diseases is the main environmental cost
I
problem.
think that's sorry to stop you here, because this I need to discuss I think specifically, so I'll come back to you with this, but before I let go, Dr. Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh, I really am kind of pushed to ask this question to you because Devapri has just mentioned about the cancer part of it, that 6 out of kind of 10,000 6 out of 1,000. 6 out of 1,000.
6 out of 10,000. So
6 out of 10,000.
10,000 might develop cancer.
Might develop cancer. I know you are also an expert of cancer. You work in that area. What's your perception? How we are going about it?
Actually, we have worked together, Devapriya and myself, on one Indo-UK project jointly that terminated in the month of December, completed in the month of December last year. And that we studied impact of food also on arsenic-induced poisoning. And her estimate is right. We know about that. And day by day, the number of cancer patients with the visible arsenosis symptoms like keratosis is increasing. We are taking a track now. Earlier, there was no tracking because very few patients were coming to the cancer hospital with, and nobody knew that there's correlation between arsenic and cancer. But since last 5-6 years, we are monitoring with different types of cancer cases coming to our hospital. And we have found this number that I support Rupiah on this number. And this may be higher also.
Maybe higher.
All the cases are not reported. And all the cases, many cases in the rural area due to poverty, they can't go to even hospital for treatment.
Okay, let me ask you a straight question. You are also part of the Minister of Environment and Forest and Climate Change various committees and expert in yours itself. Does the government, not only I think I'm talking about Union government or Bihar government, cutting across the country, various governments, do they give arsenic the due cognizance and importance? What do you feel? What's your personal understanding?
My perception is there. Government is serious about this problem.
Okay.
No doubt about that. And money is also being flowing. But somehow it is mismanaged.
It's mismanaged.
It has to be need for streamlining the mitigation policy. And it cannot be generic. Generic solution is not possible for arsenic mitigation.
Okay.
It has to be area specific. And then only it will succeed. And there's also need for community participation in all the mitigation strategies to succeed.
So the planning has to be blended. The planning has to be blended.
Yeah. Government is serious.
Planning has to be blended.
Planning is there. And unfortunately, in India, what happens that most of the planners, they're not aware with the real problem. The policymakers are, politicians. And
great. I think you have started the harness box. Let's go to Abhijit.
I always speak that. I feel that, and I'm very sorry to say about these things because I see the sufferings. And despite money being spent, if the things are like that, I never feel good. And I always I give suggestions to government. Many suggestions have been implemented, not implemented, but I keep hammering. And things are looking up. I'm positive that in coming time, more scientific solution will be adopted. I have given some advice also to Bihar government. And
absolutely. Thanks for your very, very, I think, very important opinion. Abhijit, you as a scientist being flagging off these figures of 250 millions or otherwise, you are working with the entire India and you are also working with Bangladesh, I understand. Let's concentrate on India. What your latest paper is saying about the prospective part of it? What can be? But what is the situation? And as Dr. Ghosh been pointing out, that the implementation part of it, planning part of it, what's your take on that, Abhijit?
So from my experience, and I have been also in the advisor to the Public Health Engineering Government of West Bengal. Some of my students who are engineers, we investigated what is going wrong. And we found the technology is in place. And, I think the government has a plan to do things. Where it failed is the socioeconomy, like the downstream maintenance. So, if the government cannot do everything, like as Professor Ghosh said, like we need to have community participations. And in many of these locations, what we found, the plant is in place and the chemicals are in place, but the person who is going to run the plant is not educated enough, or is not.
But obviously, that's also the responsibility of the government, not necessarily the union government, but the state government. I have always found, even in Ganga case, there is the harmony between the state and union government may be missing. Maybe the same case out here.
Yes and no. Well, yes, the reason and no, because what I understand, and again, I'm not a legal person. As of the present land rule, like if somebody gives their land to construct a plant, the government is bound to give, one of the household members the job to be the operator, or being a staff of that plant. So that person may or may not be skilled. Most of the times they are not skilled, and since they have given a plot, they are kind of entitled for the job. So they are not even interested in getting trained, because it's a job that is fixed. So they don't have a fear to lose the job. So they don't care actually.
That's amazing, Abhijit. Let me go to Professor Fryer. Professor Fryer, it's amazing that when in one side, Devapriya has just mentioned that the kind of population being affected and the cancer and everything. And the other side, as Abhijit has been very rightly pointing out, is small nitty-gritty that you have to give a job to somebody who is untrained, and you keep on keeping him because he or she has to, and is being affecting millions. So as an expert from outside, having a bird's eye view, what do you feel? What should be done about it, Professor Fryer?
Well, I think part of the challenge, and again, my colleagues in Bangladesh and Pakistan, as well as India, perhaps can speak to the broader situation, is that there is both community water supply of the sort that Abhijit is talking about, and with which I am more familiar, but also the household water supply with the tube wells, perhaps with hand pumps. And so the strategy for arsenic mitigation is perhaps not the same vis-a-vis these smallholder tube wells, for example, like in Bangladesh, where there was the effort to mark safe versus unsafe tube wells, relative to the larger sort of community water supply structures of the sort that Abhijit is talking about. And I honestly can't speak to the relative proportions of each, but I do know that there is a difference between the two. And so you face the challenges not only of making sure that you have adequately trained, ideally, technical staff, but also that the community is aware of where their water is coming from and perhaps the need for additional point of treatment solutions.
Professor Fryer, you have worked both in Mekong Basin and also the Ganges Basin. Right. Any difference out there? You are talking about community. You have also mentioned community in your earlier kind of talk. And what is the situation in Mekong and Ganga? Are the same problems both sides, or Mekong is better or Ganga is better? What is your take?
It's rather different. I think part of the situation is similar in terms of the underlying causes of the arsenic, in terms of the geology. But with the Mekong Basin, like with other basins besides the Ganga in South and East Asia, the problem was not appreciated as early as it was in West Bengal and Bangladesh. Okay. And so the scientific studies that came out somewhat later in the 2000s, in the first decade of the 2000s, than the work that was done in West Bengal and in Bangladesh in particular. I think there has been some benefiting in Cambodia and Vietnam in particular from the work that was done in India and Bangladesh in terms of understanding the scope and the potential causes of the problem.
Okay, great. On that take, let me go to Bangladesh, because Bangladesh and West Bengal are contiguous, and I think the same problem runs from one country to another. Dr. Jahid, you were talking about the implementation part of it. You mentioned that how big the problem is in Bangladesh. Now, what the government is doing or planning to do or has done so far on this agenda? Dr. Jahid.
Okay. So after enactation of the arsenic mitigation policy and implementation plan in 2004, the government started to provide alternate, safe and fresh drinking water. And the Department of Public Health Engineering is leading that part. So initially the government provided some short-term options like ponds and filter, rainwater harvesting, this type of options, dug wells. But these short-term options did not work well. Even the household level filters did not work well. So regarding the long-term option, installation of deep tube well, that works good, and still the Department of Public Health Engineering is providing deep tube wells in different parts. Single wells, as well as they are installing production tube well for the community level water supply. You know that the rural population are affected much, and in the rural part we did not have the community water supply system, but DPHE and different NGOs, they have already started to install the production tube well and the
Is it working? Is it working? Is it working so far?
Yeah. Where the demand is high, it is working very well.
Okay.
And you know that sometimes maybe there is already a source of fresh water, but due to political influences, Department of Public Health, even NGOs, they were bound to install production water supply network. So as there is not much demand, so those type of setup did not work well. But where there is demand, still working well. And
It's
also
working well.
some sorts of other options like iron arsenic removal plant for maybe household level water supply, and the community, as demand is high, so the community is also working to maintain those technologies.
Okay. And any data on the health situation in Bangladesh affected by arsenic?
Actually, since few years, as people are somehow getting alternate fresh and safe water supply, so the health aspect is not so much deteriorated.
Not deteriorated. Okay. Maybe the data is also there. Maybe, as Devapriya pointed out, maybe the data is not there. Perhaps you never know.
Yeah, we have the Directorate of Health.
The data is also an issue. Okay.
But we have also other sorts of problems, and government. Okay, still government. What I said, that the government itself admit that still 13 to 14% of our population is not getting adequate, safe and fresh.
That's very important. Let us stop here. Come back to you. The 30 to 40% is not getting safe water. That's
13 to 14. As per
30 to
government.
40. 30 to 40. Fine. Let's quickly see what going in Pakistan. Abida, you keep unmuted, Abida. Don't need to mute yourself. Abida, what's the situation? As I was pointing out that in Punjab and Sindh, there are a lot of anthropogenic pollution. So what is the situation? What the government doing now?
Basu, first of all, I want to correct you. Actually, this anthropogenic pollution, when the studies started very early in 20s, it was concluded that these are the anthropogenic, this is anthropogenic, but actually this is not anthropogenic. This is like now if you see some papers, some published papers, these show that this contamination is geogenic. There are some effect by the anthropogenic, but majorly it is geogenic. And about the initiatives for the remediation in Pakistan, actually, what I will say, the problem was not understood till like 2010 or that. But after a lot of efforts by the researchers, now recently I have visited Lahore. Lahore is the most affected city in Punjab.
So some effort from the government. So there are some efforts from the government.
Yes, I have visited Lahore recently. So there is Wasa.
But it need to be pushed up. It need to be pushed up.
So they are basically providing some filtration plants which are equipped with arsenic removal too.
Okay, some plant they have been providing. Let's go to Devapriya here. how bad is the situation overall? You mentioned about the cancer and all this, but what are the overall? How big is the situation?
So when I was just trying to give you some perspective in terms of the cases, and I just was stopped by saying that, okay, if we consider 250 million being exposed and similar situations in Bangladesh, so it brings us to 37 million people that might have some kind of skin manifestation, and which is a hallmark of toxicity, means there will be other health implications due to it. But if you look into perspective, comparing it to other diseases where India is mostly concerned, like where WHO is concerned and Indian health systems are concerned, for example, CVD. In 2016, we had got around 55 million cases. So if you talk about COVID, so how many deaths have happened? 0.1 million till death. Till date is 0.1 million, and then we take into those perspectives, then why is arsenic in the, as you has termed, back burner? Why it has gone back? Why it is not into focus? Or why are we not worried about the health of the people? One of the important answer to this is, if you can see all of us speaking today, you might have a feeling that we are all working in silos. So the researcher, the health institutes, the government, the people who are exposed, we are all in our different blocks. We are trying to solve these problems within our silos. And that's why the problem is still there, in spite of good technology, in spite of good data, in spite of knowing where the problem is, in spite of everything. This is the major problem. So we need to revamp it. We need to think that the new contemporary research, which we call design thinking, where we start the research including the participants, so the inclusivity. So we have to include the end users, we have to include the participants, we have to include government and these other stakeholders when we conceive the research. To solve this problem, we have to do this as a way forward.
A very important point. Just a quick question to you in this context. Do you think, because the arsenic problem, as I understand, manifests over a period of time. It's not right like that immediately.
Yeah, it's not like
COVID.
diarrhea.
It's not COVID that immediately you have a fever or something. So it kind of manifests over a long period of time after a long-term exposure. So do you think that the health data is underrated in South Asia, to be particular? Because as you said very rightly, we have air pollution problem, we have other issues where much more bigger numbers are there. So India is a country of 130 crores, so 1,300 millions. So do you think that that's the reason that it is being, the figure being actually being, the actual data is actually much less, what we are getting actually should be much higher? What's your take?
So you might be aware by now that we don't have appropriate record to report arsenicosis in health centers. So if you go to a local village health center, there is no trained person to understand how to record an arsenicosis case. That has been always there. It's not a new thing. It is only in big hospitals when, like as Ashok mentioned, when people go with symptoms and they have cancer already developed, then people look into and say, oh, it might be caused by arsenic because he is coming from Buxar, which is known to be contaminated. But just on that, the people themselves are not aware. So the villagers, in spite of 20 years of being working and of us going to the field, I just give a very quick example. When we went to the field to do the surveys in Bihar.
I get your point that the people are not being kind of concerned themselves. But unfortunately, in the country like India, I think government has the main role. And when we are talking that community is not coming up, I think it's the responsibility of the government to ensure that communities handle it. It's not
I
the
guess
other
it's
way
the
around.
responsibility
Government
of
has to be
all
much
of
more
us.
proactive.
Yeah.
It has to handhold the government in a much stronger manner. You just cannot leave them, oh, these guys are unaware, so let them do what they are facing. It can't be like this. You have to handhold the people, these poor people, affected people, to ensure that they are much less affected. Dr. Frere, I think we have about 15 minutes time. Let's. I think what a point being raised by Professor Mondal is that everybody is kind of working maybe in isolation. May not be this group. You may be working together. It's general. Do you think that in South Asia? So when we are talking about India's problem, I'll come to Abhijit on that as well. West Bengal and the contiguous Bangladesh are being affected together. In the Punjab, and then the Pakistan, Punjab, and Sindh being affected. Do you see the scope and opportunity to work together at the regional level, Dr. Fryer?
I do. If I may step back for just a moment too, and perhaps Professor Mundal can speak to this, in terms of the magnitude of the problem across the region, not just in any particular country, I think there may be some underappreciation too in terms of comorbidities, that just because you may not be primarily suffering from arsenic-induced cancers doesn't mean that exposure to arsenic may not have a health impact that reinforces some other sort of health issue that you already have. But because I'm not a health expert, I can't speak to that exactly. I will say, I think that one of the benefits of having researchers from outside the subcontinent involved is that it has facilitated collaboration, not just in a bilateral sense, like between the UK and India or Pakistan, or between USA and India or Pakistan or Bangladesh, but also facilitated cross-border collaborations between the countries in the subcontinent.
Absolutely, I think very important, very important. Abhijit, on that front, the cross-border collaboration, I'm not talking about the individual scientist or a group of scientists working, say, for example, I understand people like you, Abida, Anwar Saab, and you are maybe working together, but a collaboration on a wider scale, maybe a collaboration on an official level. So, for example, the kind of collaboration in climate change happening. Why can't we have something on that line? Why can't the countries like India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan having a South Asian task force on arsenic? Why can't we have it? Abhijit?
Well, yeah, very well taken point. And I suppose still so far, and both Anwar Bhai and Abida can vouch for me, mostly the transboundary work, whatever has happened, has been from the non-South Asian country initiatives. So mostly from researchers from the UK or USA, they have come through their own initiatives or some other international initiatives, and they have actually done those cross-border studies. People like maybe Anwar Bhai and me would be working just on a personal level, or Abida and me. There has not been, to my knowledge, any government-to-government, bigger chain of work that could have taken a transboundary approach. One of the reasons, and I don't know for sure if that is the original cause or not, water is possibly more sensitive than climate change on the ground. Climate change is something intangible as of yet. So we still have a lot of doubt, many of us, like what exactly is happening. Water is not. Water is something that affects on a day in, day out thing. And also water is a strategic resource for all of these countries. So there are transboundary water issues. You are yourself an expert on transboundary surface water issues, right? Transboundary groundwater issues are showing up in the South Asian perspective. They are already there in other parts of the country, of the world. In South Asia, transboundary groundwater issues are showing up. I know there has been, hypothesis that, some parts of Bangladesh have got polluted because of arsenic-laden water flowing from West Bengal, groundwater. Now, whether that has happened or not, that's a scientific merit, but a political person can take all kind of advantage by saying this.
Abhijit, is it, just sorry to interrupt you, is it actually that perception or a complete lack of awareness? Because say issues like climate change, everybody talking about air pollution, Delhi is stopped due to air pollution. But when it comes to arsenic or groundwater, which you can't see actually, so politicians don't see the environment in general. And when an issue like groundwater comes, which they can't see actually, they don't care. They care about the rivers. They care. When the Tista issue comes up, then Jahid Saab's Bangladesh and our India and West Bengal, we're talking about the Tista water or Ganges water. But when it comes to groundwater, which cannot be seen, they don't care. And the politicians don't care. My understanding as a journalist, I'm covering these issues for the last 20 years. My understanding, I have spoken to Pakistan's environment minister. I have spoken to Bangladesh environment minister. I keep on speaking to India's environment minister. My understanding is that they just don't care like the issues of groundwater or arsenic. They keep it as a local problem.
Yeah, it's somewhat true. Means they don't care because it's not visible, and also the effect shows up in 5 to 10 years, not immediately, just like COVID or diarrhea. So yeah, the problems are more fast rates than the political 5-year block, and also it's not visible. But the other reason of that is this picture of a contiguous extent of pollution is just coming up. People still so far we have been talking about armoring about it, but there was no data to demonstrate it. It is just in the last 2-3 years that we are now understanding that it's a contiguous problem all across South Asia and Southeast Asia. And it's one problem that is stemming out from the same origin.
Okay. Fine. Let's very quickly go to first Jahid Saab and then Farooqi because we are running out of time. Jahid Saab, what about the regional collaboration at the government level? I'm not talking about the individual scientist level. The government level, why can't we have an arsenic task force at South Asian level? What's your take on that, Jahid Saab?
Actually, regional and sectoral collaboration is required. There is no doubt, because you know that in Bangladesh, currently we are abstracting about 32 cubic kilometer of groundwater, and 90% for agriculture irrigation and 10% for industrial and potable use. So see, agriculture has a big demand, and still now our irrigation tube wells are within the range of about 50 to 70 meter below ground surface. So we are abstracting shallow groundwater for agriculture irrigation. But if we start to abstract irrigation water from the deeper groundwater, then arsenic may move to the deep groundwater from where we are abstracting our safe and fresh water for water supply.
Now, what do you think about the regional collaboration? Do you think that the government level it should be done, as you said?
Yeah, that's why, and you know that for the Bengal Basin, we consider it a single aquifer unit. So obviously regional collaboration is required to assess the resource as well as to allocate the water for different sectors for the sustainable use and management.
Let Abida's view on that. Abida, what do you think about regional collaboration at the South Asian level is required, or is it may be required? I think we all agree that it's required. The point is whether it's doable or not. What do you think, Farooqi, Abida?
Yes, I agree. We need some regional cooperation to solve this problem. We are working at the individual levels. We have cross-boundary studies with India, but I think the problem is, again, I agree with Abhijit, we have some political problems. That's the reason we are not going for the regional.
The geopolitics is taking over. I have been running out of my time. Last question, very quick response to expected from all of you. Let me start with Professor Fryer, and then I'll come along. Professor Fryer, what do you see? This arsenic issue is being hanging for last 30 years in South Asia, India and Bangladesh in particular. What do you see 10 years down the line? Because alternate water source and others being talked about, but not really being executed as a whole. Where do you see this arsenic issue 10 years down the line, Professor Fryer?
I think in the major aquifer basins in the Ganga and the Indus and the Brahmaputra, that we're going to realize that we cannot decouple the arsenic problem, water contamination and water supply, and so it's going to have to be addressed holistically.
Okay. Devapriya, what's your take on that?
I have to again mention you, Jayanta, that we all have to come together on this, to breaking our individual silos and come together to solve this problem. Otherwise, this problem will continue to stay as it is and will be sooner or later be ignored and pushed back due to other crises, like as you mentioned, climate change and etc. But the problem will still persist and keep on creeping to the villages of this whole area.
Absolutely. And when you are saying that out of 10,000 people being exposed, 6 can develop cancer, it's a huge figure. If you look at the 250 million figure, even the 15% of that be actually affected, Abhijit, it's a huge figure. So really, I think everybody has to come together.
It's a huge stress on the health system and the cost that the government has to incur to treat these people.
Absolutely. I think, Anwar Jahid, The huge cost will be coming on the government if they don't act on time, and time may be running out for arsenic. What's your take on that? What will be the situation 10 years down the line?
Actually, our government again started to think on arsenic problem, and the Department of Public Health Engineering formulated project. And what I think that now maybe we are focused on to supply fresh and safe drinking water, but monitoring and mobility or expansion of arsenic in groundwater is also important. If there is any expansion and mobility, that is also important. If we do not monitor that, in future, we may face again bigger problem.
Okay. Abida, are you there? Abida. Can't see Abida. Abida, are you there? Let me go to Abhijit. Abhijit.
Can I make just last point to it? So, the India is moving toward the Jal Jeevan mission that by 2024, they are going to provide clean, sustainable drinking water to every household of the country, which is in line of the SDG 6, Sustainable Development.
Exactly. That's what I'm coming to. 2030 is your target.
So if they have to do that, clean drinking water doesn't come from, nowhere. It comes from the groundwater mostly. So it is going to be a mandate to the government to find a solution for this clean water. And I suppose the government is still kind of not sure what exactly needs to be done. I had several discussions with many of the government authorities, and they are still not sure how to tackle this issue in a regional scale versus a countrywide scale, and how to take it forward. So I think in the next 10 years, there might be less of a research on the cause of it, but more on how to treat it and how to make it available to the people.
Thank you. I think it's a fascinating discussion. I just only hope that we do not bolt after the thief is left. I think we are perhaps pushing it too much to the fringe. Arsenic problem has been hanging in the literally in the water for the last 30 years, 3 decades, and it's clearly that a lot of amount has been spent, India, Bangladesh, everywhere. But as been pointed out by very eminent panelists, that the planning has not been there the way it should have been. There had been ad hocism, not being planned in that way. 2-3 things coming out. I think I will end up with that. Number one, I think the politicians and the political executives have to change their mindset about tackling arsenic. I do think they still don't take it as seriously as it should have been. Devapriya has mentioned the health implication, which is huge, and the cost will be huge. Second is the regional collaboration. I think the geopolitics in South Asia is a real problem. But in case of arsenic, we need something in the South Asian level task force where the experts like you should be part of it and try to find out a solution which pan South Asia, because a lot of issues being India, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, issues are the arsenic issues going from one country to another. I hope very, very kind of seriously that 10 years down the line, 10 maybe too far away, maybe 5 years down the line, our governments will understand and realize the issue, will try to figure out something together, as Dr. Fryer pointing out, and we'll keep and watch on this issue. As of now, today, with this, I'll complete here. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much.
While much of the world stays home, Canada's fertilizer industry keeps working to ensure the food we depend on grows better and stronger. Because without fertilizer, harvests would be cut in half. The nutrients in soil must be replenished for the next harvest. To recover from this crisis, the world depends on us. We secure tomorrow's food by fertilizing crops today. To keep things growing, you can count on us. To learn more, visit us at fertilizercanada.ca/COVID-19.